What are the causes of medication errors? Let's take a look at the errors. I mean, it's natural that we won't eradicate adverse drug events because adverse drug events just happen. And because we don't know how a specific patient will react to a specific drug. It's just trial and error. So we won't be able to eradicate that. But we can reduce adverse drug events that are due to error. And what happens is that we have a multi-level situation from the GP to the pharmacist to the patient, and at every level error can occur. And the most frequent errors that, this is a study from Japan from 2007, but I don't think it's much different from here. Wrong dose is a big problem, wrong substance, override of contraindication, prescribing errors, just writing errors when the prescription is written out, etc. Dispensing errors in the pharmacy, administration errors, either because the patient wasn't told correctly or he didn't understand or he just does it on his own, which also patients do, as you know. Yeah, little joke here. The medication error matrix shows the different levels and interactions that are possible. Prescribing, dispensing, administrating, but also monitoring. Monitoring meaning that for some medication we need the patient to come in regularly. For example, anticoagulation, right? We have to check his INR. And then in the other direction, we have knowledge-based errors, which is a big problem. How do we get the knowledge to the GP? Then there are slips and lapses. In everyday bustling practice, we just do things without thinking, and things just happen. And there are system failures. And then, of course, the clinical outcome is not necessarily that patient harm occurs. It can either be patient harm or it can be no harm. Fortunately, in many cases, it's no harm. We have a large bubble of medication errors, and we have another bubble of adverse drug reactions, and they intersect only for a small proportion. And again, half of these medication errors are truly preventable, and others may be just ameliorable. What happens on the way from the decision-making that a patient should take a drug to patient harm? We have the Swiss cheese model, and usually there are many barriers between the decision to take the drug or to prescribe the drug to patient harm. And that's why, fortunately, not all that much happened that could happen. But the problem is, if you take slices of Swiss cheese, you have a small chance that you will put slices next to each other with one hole going all through, and that's when patient harm occurs. Why is the problem likely to get worse? We will have a shift to outpatient management for cost reasons. We will have a greater number of medications per capita over time due to the change of our population. Martin showed yesterday the increase of elderly population, and this will increase the number of chronic care patients, of polymorbidity patients with polypharmacy, and this will probably increase our rate of medication errors and adverse drug events. So what can be done? Safety culture is probably one of the most important things, because a lot of these errors, I mean, if I read through the Jeder Fehler zählt in Germany, or the critical incident reporting systems that we have in almost every country now, if you read through the reports, a lot of the reports you read and then you say, well, but how could that have been avoided? I mean, that's really difficult. There's no standard strategy. So I think safety culture and being aware of the fact that error happens and that adverse drug events can happen is one of the most important aspects to improve patient safety. Another aspect is root cause analysis. We need to know where it comes from, and we have to create a safety onion, which is another nice picture like this. It's like a little bit similar to the Swiss cheese model. You know, we put if we put more slices around the patient, then it's less likely that the holes will go through. And this safety onion comprises several levels, as we said. The patient himself, then the system, the GP, the pharmacist, and we can have interventions on systems and GP level intervention on the systems and GP level, and the most important interventions we can probably have are better information technology systems, computerized prescriber order entry systems, and clinical decision support. But as we know from countries where this is already implemented, we know that GPs, if they get too many alerts, they tend to override them because they don't have the time. If I have a patient and he comes up, and if I open his medical record on the computer and I get 25 alerts because he doesn't have metformin and he has this interaction and that and whatever, this is blocking my work, right? I can't do anything because the problem is I don't have more time with this. I need more time to look through all these alerts and decide whether they make sense or not. So this is a big drawback about that. Computerized decision support does increase patient safety. This is one study that investigated the computerized decision support regarding drug treatment. They investigated only a small proportion of drugs, of course, because it would be too difficult. And you see the prescriptions were less, the wrong prescriptions were less with clinical decision support, but not all that much, you know. I mean, the problem is fortunately, GPs are pretty good. They're doing a pretty good job. So they're even those without the clinical decision support are only making 4% prescriptions with errors. So there's a pretty low line to start with. And if we lower this to 2.5%, it's of course significant, it's of course important, but there's still 2.5% of errors that occur. And the interesting thing about this study is, and I think this will be very representative of clinical decision support implemented, the physicians accepted only 40% of the recommendations, and the other recommendations were overridden. System-level interventions, okay, we can increase knowledge and we can improve safety culture by reporting systems. And then moving to the next level, we can have interventions on the pharmacist level. And here's one big study that's currently being done and producing first results. It's an intervention, the so-called pincer trial. And it showed a significant decrease in inappropriate prescribing after 6 months. So I think pharmacist-led interventions are worth to be implemented. And I think the collaboration between pharmacists and GPs needs to be improved. And then, of course, there are interventions around the patient and around the doctor-patient relationship. Communication is a very important factor for patient adherence. We need to move from us telling the patient what to take to deciding in a shared decision-making process what medication the patient should take. And if the patient is part of this decision, then he will be more willing to adhere to the treatment that has been agreed on. Conclusions. Interventions need to occur at many levels to effectively reduce error. This applies to medication error as well as diagnostic error. We need a better awareness and improvement of safety culture. And as was already said yesterday, we need more research into this. There's very little data available, especially on interventions, and we do a lot of things, but we don't know what the effect is. And of course, there are good arguments to do things, to keep on doing interventions in spite of the lack of evidence, because, I mean, we are using life vests, and there are very few studies that really showed that they help us. But still, I think if we implement interventions to improve patient safety, we should accompany these implementations with research to check their effectivity. Thank you.
Thank you, Andreas, for this very interesting lecture. I wonder if there's anybody who wants, we can take some time for a few questions. Anybody like to pose a question to Andreas?